Right, where is it? Parking, can you very good? Good afternoon, Your Honors. May we expect everyone to take their respective seats. The Committee of the Whole House is about to start. Thank you.
Ganun daw, RBH7 daw noon. Eh sabi ko, maganda itong pakita, nandito ka sa baba para si speaker ng ano.
Sayang, ang daming tao. Yes, but bilisan natin yung oras. Kasi mabilis natin.
Para mapakita.
Ano pa, national anthem.
Hindi ba pwedeng suspend yung roll call para makapita sa spirit na yun?
Whole House is called to order. Please stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupit, di ka pasisingil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong baghaw, may nilang ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa
Please remain standing for the invocation to be delivered by the Honorable Arnan C. Panaligan, representative of the 1st District of Oriental Mindoro.
Almighty and everlasting God, we praise and glorify you. We acknowledge your omnipotence over us and the entire creation. We know that without your presence and guidance, our work will come to nothing. Eternal Father, we, the members of the House of Representatives, are gathered in this hall as a committee of the whole to commence the solemn task of deliberating on resolution of both houses number 7 that proposes amendments to certain provisions of the 1987 Constitution. We therefore seek your guidance as we study and discuss this resolution. Enlighten us, O Lord, so that we will be able to see the merits of this proposal, correct its flaws, and ensure that in the end, what will come out of our deliberations will redound to the best interest of our country and our people. Almighty God, we know that the proposal to amend the Constitution has caused division and discord among our leaders and their followers. Harsh words and accusations have been heard from one camp to another, and imputations of selfish motives have been attributed to those who were accused of pushing for charter change. Charges and countercharges have been thrown from the opposing camps. Lord God, we know that this was not what you desire. You do not delight when your children quarrel. We therefore implore you, Almighty God, to guide us and enlighten us as we discuss the proposal to amend certain provisions of our fundamental law. May we meet in harmony and find common ground. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, may we come together and reason together as the chosen representatives of your people. As we meet today to discuss resolution of both houses number 7, may we debate without sowing discord. May we deliberate without causing disunity. And may we articulate our ideas without making accusations. Omnipotent God, help us to realize that the task of amending the Constitution is not a partisan or political issue that should divide us. We know that the Constitution, as a fundamental charter, cannot provide for all the solutions to the nation's problems. But this written instrument establishes the organs and institutions of government that will be tasked to address those problems. Help us therefore to realize, O Lord, that amending the Constitution is a matter of transcendental importance for the nation. Finally, O Lord, like King Solomon, we ask you to grant us wisdom and discernment as we meet today in this chamber, so that we will be able to know what is good in the governance of your people. Send forth your Spirit on us, O Lord God, the supreme lawgiver, and give us the knowledge to know your will as we begin the historic task of reviewing our paramount law. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we proceed with the roll call of the members.
The Secretary General is directed to call the roll of the members of the House of Representatives.
Roll call of members, honorable representatives, Abalos, Abante, Abunda, Acharon, Asidre, Acop, Adyong, Advincula, Agarao, Alba, Albano, Almario, Almonte, Alonte, Alvarez Jose, Alvarez Mercedes, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amante, Amatong, Ang, Angara, Aquino, Aquino Magsaysay, Arbison, Arenas, Arrogancia, Asistio Ataide Aumentado, Balindong, Barbers, Baronda, Barzaga, Bascug, Bautista, Bautista Lim, Benitez, Bernos, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondoc, Bongalon, Bordado, Bosita, Briones, Brosas, Buhain, Bulot Bectang, Bustos, Cabredo, Cagas, Cahayon Uy, Calderon, Calixto, Campos, Cawagdan, Cardema, Cari, Castro Franz, Castro Jane, Celeste, Chan, Chato, Chua, Chungalao, Co Angelica Natasha, Co Elizaldi, Co Pilar, Coanco Jaime Eduardo Mark, Coanco Mark, Colada, Collantes, Corvera, Cruz Ambrosio, Cruz Ricardo, Cua, Coresma, Dagook, Dalipe, Dalog, Dayanghirang, Daza de Jesus de Venecia, Defensor del Mar de los Santos, Dimaporo Muhammad Khalid, Dimaporo City Amina, Dionisio, Domingo, Duavit, Dohali, Duterte, Di Faustino Ino, Di Faustino Michael Carlos, Di Ian Paul, Ecleo, Emano Enverga, Escudero, Espares, Espina, Estrella, Yudela, Fariñas, Fernandez, Ferrer Antonio, Ferrer Juliet Marie, Flores, Fortes, Frasco, Fresnedi, Fuentebella, Galeos, Garcia Albert, Garcia Dante, Garcia Jose Arturo, Garcia Maria Angela, Garcia Pablo John, Garcia Vincent, Guardiola, Garin, Gasataya, Gato, Go Edward, Ed Christopher, Go Mark, Goles, Gomez, Gonzaga, Gonzalez Aurelio, Gonzalez Neptali, Gonzalez Sandro, Goriseta, Guico, Ginto, Gulias, Gutierrez, Horas, Jaresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera, Ribata, Javier, Ko Olga, Ko Ricardo, Ko Wilton, Konghun, Labad-Labad, Lacson, Lacson Noel, Lagman, Lagon Daphne, Lagon Sunny, Lara Lazatin, Lee Legarda, Libanan, Limkaichong, Loyola, Luistro, Lumayag, Macapagal-Arroyo, Maceda, Madrona, Magsino, Malapitan, Mangawang, Maniquis, Manuel, Marañon, Marcoleta, Marcos, Mariano Hernandez, Mariño, Marquez, Martinez, Mastura, Matibag, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Mercado Revilla, Miguel, Momo, Morden, Nava, Nisay, Nograles Juan Fidel Felipe, Nograles Margarita, Nolasco, Oemnal, Olaso Olivares, Ongchuan, Ordanes, Ortega, Oano Dizon, Padiernos, Paduano, Paglas, Palma, Panaligan, Pancho, Panotes, Pascual, Peña, Pimentel, Plaza, Pleito, Primicias Agabas, Pumaren, Puno, Kimbo, Rama, Rehencia, Remulla, Revilla Brian, Revilla Ramon Jolo, Reyes, Rillo, Rivera, Robes, Rodriguez Eulogio, Rodriguez Rufus, Roman, Romero, Romualdez Ferdinand Martin, Romualdez Yeda Marie, Romualdo, Romulo, Roque, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sakaluran, Salceda, Sali, Salimbangon, Salo, Salvame, Santos, Saulog, Silverio, Singson Richel, Singson Ronald, Singson Mihan, Solon, Suwan, Swansing Horacio, Swansing Micaela, Angela, Suarez, Talyado, Tamayo, Tambunting, Tan Joseph, Tan Keith Micah, Tan Reynolds Michael, Tan Samir, Tan Stephen James, Tan Tambut, Tan Chait, Tan Watco, Tariela, Teodoro, Teves, Tianco, Tieng, Tolentino, Tulfo, Erwin, Tulfo Jocelyn, Tulfo Ralph Wendell, Tupas, Tutor, T, Umali, Unabia, Ungab, Uy, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas, Vargas Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso Tuazon, Vergara, Versosa, Villa, Villafuerte Luis Raymond, Villafuerte Miguel Luis, Villanueva, Villar, Villaraza Suarez, Villarica, Violago, Yamsuan, Yap Christian Tel, Yap Christopher Son, Yap Edvic, Yap Eric, Yu Divina Grace, Yu Jazel Victoria, Yulo, Zamora Amparo Maria, Zamora Maria Carmen, Zamora Isabel Maria, Zubiri. Mr. Speaker, the roll call shows that 207 members responded to the call.
With 207 members responding to the call, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. Speaker, we are now ready to receive your opening remarks.
My dear colleagues, I address this honorable committee of the whole on a matter of utmost national concern that will impact not just the present citizens of our great nation, but also for the generations to come. Today, we constitute ourselves into the Committee of the Whole House to deliberate on resolution of both Houses number 7, which proposes the much-needed and long-overdue amendment of the economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution. The Committee of the Whole House will allow us to act with dispatch on this crucial matter and enable every member to freely contribute in the discussion of this most important proposal. Our collective voice will most definitely reflect the consciousness and the sense of the people that we represent. We would like to have more flexibility in our economic policies and be able to compete with other countries for foreign investments by removing the constitutional restrictions and allowing Congress, through legislation, to set the terms and conditions for foreign investments in vital sectors of our economy. The times are changing. We need to adapt if we are to become more competitive globally, invite technologies and, of course, advancements, and provide a more conducive economic platform where people have wider opportunities for growth. We should do it now, lest we risk lagging behind the rest of the world when it comes to economic development and productivity. The proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution are three-pronged. Number one, reform the public service sector. Number two, open access of our children to the best educational institutions, whether Filipino or foreign-owned. And three, to liberalize the advertising industry. Reforming the provisions of the Constitution on foreign equity ownership in corporations, including those that operate public services, would further open up the Philippine market and attract significantly bigger foreign direct investments. By infusing foreign investments into the national economy, we could provide better services to the public and our business sector. We can have cheaper and reliable power and electricity, cheaper and faster internet service, and better and more modern transport system. With better infrastructure, we would be able to encourage more investments, both foreign and domestic, that will create more and high-quality jobs for our people. With this open market, globally competitive approach, we will have fresher perspectives on how to best operate and provide public services that are currently reserved to only a very few privileged Filipinos. While it may be argued that bitter experiences on foreigners controlling our nationalized industries is already a thing in an over-century-old past, we are now wise enough to learn not to make the same mistakes twice. The proposed amendment would give Congress authority to pass laws to allow ownership of foreign equity in corporations in the Philippines because it rests on Congress to pass or repeal laws on allowable foreign equity ownership of corporations in the Philippines, particularly those engaged providing services to the public. The restrictive economic provisions of the Constitution also affect education. Currently, ownership of educational institutions is limited to Filipino citizens and corporations with 60% Filipino ownership. The control and administration of educational institutions are currently reserved to Filipinos exclusively. Experts say that the Philippines has the most stringent restrictions on foreign direct investments to higher education, contrary to the trend of our neighboring countries such as Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore, which allow 100% FDIs on higher education, while Thailand allows FDI up to 50% and Indonesia up to 49%. A number of studies also suggest that Filipinos are lagging behind in terms of education. The Philippines consistently spends less than the recommended 6% of the national budget on education. The inability to spend on education hampers efforts to improve infrastructure, upgrade educational resources, and enhance teacher training, which ultimately affects the quality of education provided. According to UNICEF, the Philippines had a teacher shortage of 80,000 in 2021. This shortage impacts the student ratio, limits personalized attention to students, and deteriorates the overall quality of education. We believe in the competence of our Filipino educators, and however, we must admit that Filipinos do not have a monopoly of wisdom and learning. Learning is a process of acquiring and accumulating knowledge, understanding, skills, and even behavior. It is best attained by collaboration and exposure to new and different experiences, approaches, and perspectives. By limiting the education sector to local perspectives, we are also restraining the potentials of our children to see the bigger worldview and maximize their learning potentials. By constituting the committee of the whole House, we can better hear pedagogies and viewpoints from our esteemed House members. We have among our midst experts in the sector of education who I believe can help us exhaustively stretch out points that must be considered in amending economic provisions of the Constitution on education. The advertising industry is another area that is unnecessarily restricted by the current Constitution. Only Filipinos and corporations with at least 70% Filipino ownership can participate in the advertising industry. This is a peculiar situation considering that the very concept of advertising is to reach as many and as far as possible. Limiting foreign investments in an industry that is boundless is a point to ponder on for the Committee of the whole House. I invite our honorable members to consider the broader and farther reach that Philippine advertising industry can possibly have if we liberalize this industry and allow greater collaboration with foreign advertising firms, which actually are already present in the local scene today. We have to formalize their participation to enable greater gains in such productive partnerships. Sadly, while we at the House of Representatives are doing our very best to advance the much-needed upgrade and facelift of the economic provisions of the Constitution, we are being accused of being against in pushing for these essential reforms. Categorically, we are denying these unfounded and baseless accusations. Wala po tayong hinangad sa kapulungan ito kundi ang kabutihan ng sambayanang Pilipino. And we work night and day to make this happen. Now, to dispel doubts that the efforts of the House of Representatives in pushing for the amendment of the economic provisions of the Constitution is politically motivated, we are actually adopting all the three proposed amendments of the Senate version of the resolution of both houses, number 6, in total. This should ensure that the public and that the Congress is only touching on the economic provisions that need to adapt with the changing times. There is absolutely nothing in RBH7 that hovers on any political provision of the Constitution. Malinaw po sa ating lahat ang misyon natin ngayon. Baguhin ang ilang economic provisions na pumipigil sa pagpapasok ng mga negosyo mula sa ibang bansa. Mga negosyong lilikha ng trabaho at magpapasigla ng ating ekonomiya. Ito lamang ang pakay natin, ekonomiya, hindi politika. The House leadership believes that the participation of the members of this chamber in the deliberation and the discussions on the proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution is simply indispensable. But this is not just an ordinary piece of legislation. We are talking about the fundamental and supreme law of the land. We have to be very careful, and we always have been, in touching on these reforms. Thus, we also need the help of our experts in the various fields that will be affected by the proposed amendments to the Constitution. We invite experts from the private sector and government institutions that have known expertise on corporations, foreign direct investments, our economic managers, the educators, and the current players in the advertising industry to come forward and provide their much appreciated insights on the proposed changes. We want to create an environment ripe with opportunities where jobs that are plentiful, education is world-class, and the fruits of progress is shared by everyone. To do this, we need to break barriers that hold us back. We must pave the way to cross over an era of prosperity, innovation, and inclusivity. In closing, I call on the full support and cooperation of the members of the House of Representatives to give this committee of the whole House no less than our utmost best. I call upon the Filipino people to support this great leap forward. Let us make sure we have not left any stone unturned in scrutinizing this legislative measure. The Filipino people need this change. We owe it to our constituents and their generations to come. We have to make this happen now more than ever. And with your support and help and the trust of the Filipino people to the great work we are doing in this august chamber, we can make it happen. Marami pong salamat at mabuhay ang mamayang Pilipino. Majority Leader.
I ask for a minute suspension.
Session suspended.
Yeah. Dito na. The
Saan ba nagpapalinis ng tanong?
hearing of the Committee of the Whole is resumed. To the chairperson of the Committee of the Whole, the Honorable Speaker Ferdinand Martin G. Romualdez, my colleagues, the honorable members of the House of Representatives, esteemed guests in this august chamber, good afternoon. Today, we begin deliberations on resolution of both Houses number 7, which seeks to propose amendments to certain economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. As your Majority Leader and as one of the authors of RBH7, I have been consistent in the belief that there is a need to open certain industries of the country to foreign investors, as this will result to further economic growth and enhance the revenue-generating potential of our government. This reform in the economic policies of the country will redound to the benefit of the Filipino people, who will be afforded more opportunities for education, employment, investments, and services from its government. Indeed, the passage of RBH7 is a step forward towards achieving of our collective aspirations of a bagong Pilipinas. I therefore encourage all our members in this august body to attend and actively participate in the meetings of the Committee of the Whole House to deliberate on RBH7. Let the voices of your districts and party list groups you represent in this House of the People be heard. Before we proceed, we would like to express our appreciation to the invited resource persons who offered their precious time to attend these historic proceedings. May I request our Secretariat to acknowledge. Anyway, I have here a list. The chair would like to recognize our guests the Secretary of the National Economic and Development Authority, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. The Secretary of Finance, Secretary Ralph G. Recto. The Secretary of Trade and Industry, Secretary Alfredo Pascual. Governor of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Governor Eli Remolona Jr. The President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ms. Nina Mangyo. The President of the Philippine Exporters Confederation, Employers Confederation of the Philippines, Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. The Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Incorporated, Mr. Eb Hincliffe. The President of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Ms. Sarah Murphy. The President of the Foundation for Economic Freedom, Mr. Toti Chiquiabco. The Executive Director of Ibon Foundation, Mr. Sani Africa. Associate Professor and Department Chair, UP School of Economics, Mr. Carl Robert Handok. The Senior Research Fellow of the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, Dr. Adora Navarro. The Supervising Legislative Staff Officer, Congressional Policy and Budget Department, House of Representatives, Mr. Rucher Lacaza. The Chairman of the Philippine Constitution Association, Chairman of PhilConsa, Retired Chief Justice, the Honorable Justice Reynato S. Puno. Also with us, Retired Justice Adolfo Ascuna. The Executive Director of Ako Bicol Party List, Attorney Alfredo Garbin Jr. Professor Emeritus, UP School of Economics, Professor Raul Fabella. The Dean, Ateneo School of Government, Dr. Philip Arnold Tuaño. The former Dean, Senior Economist, Ateneo School of Government, Ateneo de Manila University, Dr. Ronald Mendoza. And last but not the least, for these first 2 days, I understand this is the guest list for day 1 and day 2, Professor Emeritus, UP School of Economics, Professor Solita Monsod. Again, we thank you for your attendance to this meeting of the Committee of the Whole. To ensure orderly proceedings of the Committee of the Whole House, this representation would like to propose the following ground rules. And I would like to ask our distinguished colleagues to take note of our ground rules of the Committee of the Whole House. 1. Guest resource persons shall finish their statements first before a member may propound clarificatory questions. 2. The resource persons may be allowed to participate through electronic platforms like video conference, telecommunications, and other computer online technologies, subject to the authorization of the Speaker as provided for under Rule 9, Section 35 of the Rules of the House. 3. Members who wish to interpellate the resource persons shall register with the Secretariat. 4. Each member shall be given 10 minutes to interpellate and pose clarificatory questions to the resource persons. A second round may be held if necessary where the same rule will apply. The 10 minutes does not include the response time of our invited resource persons. 5. The meetings of the Committee of the Whole shall be conducted from Mondays to Wednesdays, and if necessarily, on Thursdays. 6. The committee shall approve the report of the Committee of the Whole to be presented to the House for action. Our dear members, as far as practicable, the meeting shall proceed by subject matter based on the 3 proposed amendments contained in RBH7. Resource persons whose expertise fall on a certain subject matter shall be invited on the day that particular topic will be considered and deliberated. And so you have it. This is the proposed ground rules of the Committee of the Whole House. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairperson, I moved for the adoption of the ground rules as stated and announced by our distinguished chairperson. So moved.
There's a motion to adopt the ground rules of the Committee of the Whole House.
Mr.
Any
Chair.
second?
Parliamentary inquiry before we take a vote on that. Clarification on the rules that you had read.
Before that, any second? The chair would like to recognize Senior Deputy Minority Leader Daza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify for all the members, is the 10-minute rule just for the time used by the member, or does that include the answer from the resource person?
As I stated earlier, the 10 minutes will only take up or eat up the time of your questioning and does not include the time used by the resource persons in responding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to clarify, is the sequence going to be similar to previous hearings where it's minority and majority, minority, majority?
Well, as practiced by this House, the minority is the priority, and we'll start with the interpellation with the members of the minority.
Thank you. And my last question, Mr. Chair. Thank you for naming the resource persons who are here. are the members allowed to request additional resource persons to attend future hearings?
No problem. We will try to accommodate that request coming from our members.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Majority Leader.
There's a
Mr.
motion.
Speaker,
There's a second.
clarificatory question, Mr. Speaker.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr.
You have the
Speaker.
floor.
If I heard it correctly, Mr. Speaker, after the committee report, the committee shall approve it. Is it automatic that we approve it, or we decide on it as a House, Mr. Speaker?
Well, this is the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole House. Then we approve it, then we will submit a committee report to the plenary in session for second reading.
So we decide on it, Mr. Speaker, not automatically approve it, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Speaker.
have to vote on it as a Committee of the Whole House before we present it to the plenary for second reading. So this is a committee hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that clarification, because initially I thought, this representation thought that we will just approve it immediately, but we vote on it, and that is the interpretation of the Speaker. Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker.
May I add, Mr. Chairperson,
Floor Leader.
for the information of our distinguished minority leader, we are acting as if we are a committee. And like any other committee, of course, we will be coming out with the committee report. And before we report it out, the committee must approve the same so that it will be transmitted to the plenary for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, precisely
Yes.
that is my question,
Minority Leader.
because we are not supposed to approve that immediately. We are supposed to vote on that. And based on our voting, if majority voted or whatever the number is, that shall be the report of the committee, even if it is
Yes.
a committee of the whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll be voting and reporting to the plenary.
Thank you. That's all.
There is a pending motion, duly seconded. Any more discussions?
I understand, Mr. Speaker,
Floor Leader.
that Honorable Castro would like to ask question. Lana? Clarificatory.
Clarificatory question.
For the ground rules?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Castro.
Yeah. So, my question is on the procedural, Mr. Speaker. Majority Floor Leader.
We're taking up first the
Sa
ground
ground
rules.
rules.
Ground rules.
Sa
related to the ground
clarification,
rules?
Yeah.
Okay.
Clarification, Mr. Chair, on the number of minutes, no? So, as we discussed yung RBA, yung per topic doon sa resolution on both houses, yung ibig bang sabihin, Mr. Chair, nung 10 minutes per topic doon sa resolutions natin, that is 10 minutes?
Yes. But
Okay.
depending on the topic, we can, if the following hearing, everybody has another fresh 10 minutes. And you can even take a second round. We want to exhaustively discuss this.
Yeah, kasi pag per topic, Mr. Chair, so di ba
Per day.
in a common committee meeting like this one is converted into this committee meeting is committee of the whole presided by the rules committee, right? So yung per topic, so syempre magsasalita yung mga speakers natin or resource persons natin. And after that, we will ask questions. So paano mangyayari, Mr. Chair, yung per topic, yung magiging yung 10 minutes na sinasabi natin?
Our dear colleague, meron po tayong 3 amendments pinopropose. So our resource persons were invited to more or less be there to at least enlighten us on per amendment.
Yeah.
So yung resource persons invited for the day will respond to specific to
Okay.
a specific amendment. Now, if you have further questions, then you can take the second round.
Yeah.
But
Oo.
on the second day, if it's another amendment, iba naman po yun. Hindi counted yung 10 minutes. It doesn't mean that
Yes.
your 10 minutes is for the whole proceedings of the Committee of the Whole House. Don't worry, I would like to assure our colleagues here attending the Committee of the Whole House, the Chair will be more accommodating when it comes to your request for additional time.
Yes, so sinasabi natin, Mr. Chair, yung mga invited natin na guest would be on the first amendments. Sinasabi natin, kasi nagpasa po ako ng resource persons to be invited. At isa lang yung nag-grant, o isa lang po yung na-invite. So, ibig sabihin nun, sa isang topic, hanggang sa ma-exhaust natin lahat ng mga resource persons na isasuggest. Kasi doon sa
Yes.
7 na guest resource persons, isa lang po ang ginrant ng
We
committee.
can invite them again, Representative Castro, in the next hearing, and you'll be given time by the Chair, another 10 minutes. So may we, as is to facilitate, can we now...
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I don't know if,
No.
if I can ask this now as regards to our procedural. So, nasa ground rules pa lang din naman tayo, Mr. Chair. So, may I be called again for the questions of procedure?
Yeah. Okay, there's a motion, duly seconded. Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Floor Leader.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Ito pong ginagawa natin ay parang committee hearing presided, Mr. Chair and Majority Floor Leader, presided by the Rules Committee. And in the RBH7, syempre alam natin that is an amendments to our Constitution. So if you are going to apply yung sinasabi natin dun sa rules natin. So, siyempre, Mr. Chair, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, may rules tayo on the committee level noong pag-uusapan nating topic. So, naguguluhan ako, Mr. Chair, kung ano bang ginagawa natin ngayon? Parang constituent assembly ba ito? O just simple committee hearing with as committee of the whole. So ganon. Kasi Mr. Chair, yung RBH7 ay marami siyang topic. So if we are going to have a committee hearing on a certain a bill or resolution, di ba nakalagay dun sa rule natin, nakalagay po sa Constitution, Article 6, Section 26, Paragraph 1 ng 1987 Constitution, every bill passed by the Congress shall embrace only one subject which shall be expressed in title thereof. Kasi yung RBH7 natin, Mr. Chair, aside from sinasabi nating economic provisions, may nakikita tayo dito na hindi rin namang iba rin yung topic. Like for example, on education, on advertisement, etc. So ano po ba yung nagagabay sa atin? So I think na tayo dito para na tayong nagko-constituent assembly. Kung gano'n ang mangyayari, kasi meron tayong 3 topic. So could you enlighten this representation, Mr. Chair, about the procedure that we are undergoing, Mr. Chair?
Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, you can either characterize it as a constituent assembly or a legislative body. In both cases, we are exercising our constituent power, meaning the authority and the right of this Congress to amend or propose revision to the Constitution as provided for and as guaranteed by the Constitution. We also have our own rules that allows us to make proposal by amendment or revision to the Constitution as an ordinary resolution, a House concurrent resolution, and as mandated by our rules, because we are considering it as a resolution, then like an ordinary bill, it should pass 3 readings, meaning first, second, and third reading. The only difference in terms of voting, the proposed amendment to be approved must be approved by at least 3/4 of all the members of the House. Any bill
Okay.
for that matter, when it is filed, is either referred to a committee which has jurisdiction over it, but nothing prevents the House from constituting itself as a committee of the whole when it, in its discretion, it merits the entire full attention and to expedite the proceeding insofar as that particular measure is concerned. We are now in that process. It's a bill, it's a resolution rather, filed, and the Committee on Rules, and rightly so, instead of referring it to the Committee on Constitutional Amendments, had, through the Majority Leader, moved that we constitute ourselves as a committee of the whole. And now, we are now taking up this resolution as a committee. And
Yes,
after that, pagkatapos po niyan, pagka-approve natin ng committee report na yon, then i-report natin sa plenary, i-sponsor yan, pagdidibatehan uli, like any other resolution or bill, and then kung ma-approve na lahat, tapos na lahat, tapos na yung period of amendment, and we vote on it, makuha yung 3/4, and then, padala natin sa Senate. Yun ang magiging procedure.
Yes, thank you po dun sa
Representative Castro.
clarification, Mr. Chair. Thank you po, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So thank you po sa clarification ng ating ng ating chairman, Mr. Speaker. Kaya nga po, yun yung sinasabi natin kanina. Kaya matter of talaga ito, matter of yung procedure natin as against dun sa Constitution. Kasi sanay tayo kapag committee, pag nagdi-discuss tayo ng anumang amendments or anumang whatever bill or resolutions, 'di ba? Merong one topic per bill or resolution. One topic per bill or resolution. Kasi may tatlo dito na pinag-uusapan natin, Mr. Chair. So ang ibig bang sabihin niyan, without us knowing na kino-convert natin itong Committee of the Whole na pinamumunuan ng Rules Committee ng parang Constituent Assembly na tayo. So kung ganun, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, so we might as well sabihin na natin talaga kung ito ba ay Constituent Assembly or just a simple committee. Kasi pag committee, mag-apply yung rule natin na one bill, one topic, di ba? So meron tayong andaming topic dito sa RBH7. So yun yung kino-question ko doon, Mr. Chair, sa procedural. So we should be frank to us kung ito ba ay kino-convert na natin talaga sa Constituent Assembly or just a committee hearing. Kung committee hearing lang dapat, kung committee hearing ito, dapat one topic, one bill
With the
or
kind
resolution.
indulgence of the distinguished leader, procedurally, Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole was created upon motion of the Majority Leader last week. After that, session was adjourned. Following day, Wednesday, session was resumed and then adjourned on that day also. Any question to the creation of the Committee of the Whole should have been done during the time of its creation, or even assuming for the sake of argument that the lady voted with the majority in creating convening the committee as a whole, then she should have filed her motion for reconsideration last Tuesday or last Wednesday. The mere fact that we are now a day after the creation of the committee, any question on the procedure as to the creation of the committee has no more basis to be had, Mr. Speaker. For this purpose, Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker.
Or leader?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Castro.
Ay, ako.
can we,
So,
Mr. Speaker, can we just note her position, because at any rate we could no longer pass on her position. As I have said, the time to question the same has already expired. And for this purpose, Mr. Speaker, after noting it, can we now proceed to consider RHB number 7?
I object, Mr. Speaker, doon sa ng chairman na.
There being an objection, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, kasi procedure nga lang po yung tinatanong ko. You have to answer
Mr.
po.
Speaker, there is an objection.
Yung tinatanong
May
ko,
I
no?
ask that
Kasi
that
as if, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker,
there's a
yung amendment sa Constitution parang ginagawa lang natin
Representative Castro.
simpleng bill. So, yun po yung tanong ko doon, Mr. Chair. Wala naman din tayong pagkakataon ng last Monday ba or last week na magtanong ng procedural. Kaya wag niyo po akong i-technical. So, ito nga sinasabi natin, ano ba, 'di ba? Sabi nga ng speaker, Romualdez, lahat babagbibigyan ng pagkakataon na magsalita kung ano man yung gusto niyong sabihin dito sa plenary na ito. And yet, gagawan
Okay.
niyo ako ng technicality. Sasabihin niyo sa akin na dapat
Representative-
nasabi na yan noon.
Representative Castro, the chair took note of the statements and your position. Floor leader.
I heard that there's an objection. So let's go to the vision of the House. Can we ask those in favor of her objection or those who are
No,
against?
Mr.
Representative
Speaker,
Castro, what's
Mr.
your pleasure?
Speaker, may tanong lang po nga ako. So ito bang plenary na ito, kino-convert na ba natin yan sa Constituent Assembly? Kasi po, ang daming topic doon sa RBH. If it is simple bill lang, nakalagay sa rule natin, one topic, one bill. Eh, maraming topic ito eh. So ibig sabihin ba, pag-uusapan na natin dito, we are on a Constituent Assembly na po? So yun lang po yung gusto ko malinawan.
Representative Castro, I think the floor leader has manifested well his position and stand. I think the members of the committee understood it as well.
Mr. Presiding Officer.
Yes, Representative Lagman, you're nice, you have the floor.
The Honorable Castro, Mr. Presiding Officer, is not moving for a reconsideration of the conversion of the whole House into a committee. She is simply asking for a clarification on certain procedural matters. So she should be given the floor in order to ventilate her question. She is not actually moving for a reconsideration. So the rule on when to file a motion for reconsideration is not supposed to be invoked.
It has been answered already by the floor leader, yeah.
Exactly, Mr. Speaker, because I said a while ago, you can say that we are a constituent assembly or a legislative body, but in either case, we are acting on the basis of our constituent power to amend the Constitution. Baka ho magkaiba lang kasi kami ng pagkakaintindi ng Constituent Assembly. Ang Congress kasi can act, tayo can act on our own.
Mr. Presiding
Okay.
Officer, can I just
Mr. Speaker.
continue?
Please, before you speak, you have to be recognized by the chair. Representative Lagman.
This committee of the whole can never be considered as a constituent assembly. A constituent assembly is an assembly of senators and representatives supposed to propose amendments to the Constitution. That is the import and meaning of a constituent assembly. A committee or a committee of the whole or a regular committee can never be considered as a constituent assembly.
The statements of Representative Lagman is noted by the chair.
Thank
Floor
you.
leader.
That's only the other side of the view, Mr. Speaker, because there is a contrary view. And nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, can we now continue in considering the purpose
Leader.
for what we are now gathered, and that is the consideration of House Bill number...
Mr. Speaker,
Number
continuing objection pa rin po, Mr. Speaker. May I be
Okay,
allowed?
noted by the chair. Floor leader, please proceed.
And
Mr. Speaker, can I have the floor?
Mr. Speaker, I have a
Aye.
pending motion, which is the consideration of House Bill number 7, and for this purpose, I move that Secretariat be directed to read the copy of the title of the resolution.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr.
There is
Speaker,
a motion.
Mr.
Speaker,
Speaker,
Is there any, before that, there is a motion, is there any objection to the motion presented by the floor leader for the consideration of resolution of both houses number 7? Any objection?
objection, Mr. Speaker, objection. We are now in the process of approving the procedure. That is what we
Representative.
have. Congressman Rodriguez, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you. We are, when you read the procedure for the hearings today and tomorrow, it was moved by the Majority Leader, the Honorable Gonzales, to approve it. And there were comments, and we have a comment, the clarificatory question of the Honorable Franz Castro. In other words, on the procedure, that is what we have now. Our Congressman Castro merely requests merely wants clarification. Number one, she is trying to ask whether we can take, in this particular proceedings, 3 subject matters according to her. These are very important questions. Because under our law on ordinary legislation, it has only one subject matter, and I agree with Congressman Castro. However, on that issue, that's the first issue, Mr. Chairman. The second issue is Constituent Assembly. On the first issue, Mr. Chairman, it is only one subject matter because it refers to amendments to the Constitution on the economic amendments, specifying the 3. In the previous Congresses, we have approved such kind of amendments. In fact, in legislation, we have amendments to the National Interior Revenue Code, sections 140, 185, and so forth. There are many provisions in the National Interior Revenue Code which are separate subject matter, but it is the amendment to the National Interior Revenue Code, and that is true with many other codes. So in this case, we are amending the Constitution. And so in the Constitution, there is one subject matter because it only pertains to 3 provisions of the Constitution on economic provisions. So the answer for that, Mr. Chairman, is that it complies with our rules on having one subject matter. And previous Congresses, which have in the 18th Congress, in the 16th Congress, the Committee of Constitutional Amendments, and we have here Chairman Pido Garbin of the 18th Congress, precisely have approved this in the committee because this is one subject matter. So that is the view of this chairman of the Constitutional Committee as far as the question of our distinguished colleague, Congresswoman Franz Castro is concerned. There is one subject matter. Second question is, the second, Mr. Speaker, is this a constituent assembly? Since we follow the Bernas proposal on having legislation to amend the Constitution because the Senate does not even want to meet with us. So that is why we are doing this, Mr. Chairman. Because they never, in the past 36 years of the Constitution, the Senate has been an obstructionist Senate as far as amendments to the Constitution. Even economic amendments, they have nothing to do with it until they were afraid of people's initiative. That they now have this resolution number 6, Mr. Chairman. And so as a matter of whether it's a Constituent Assembly, it is not. This is a committee of the whole. We vote, a majority will vote for this because we become a Constituent Assembly with this approved in the committee of the whole and sent to the entire plenary where we will get 3/4 vote, Mr. Chairman. So with that clarification, I think, Mr. Chairman, what our colleague, Congressman Castro, has done is quite proper in this particular proceedings, that she will be clarified. So we like the speaker to know whether she is clarified, because then we can go back to the voting to approve. This is not yet the resolution of 7. This is yet approval of the procedure that you said. As another note, Mr. Chairman, we cannot dichotomize or truncate the discussion. We have the Chief Justice here. He will not only be talking about amendments of public utility. He is the expert of the entire Constitution. And so when we hear our distinguished colleagues, you have here Tote Chicamco of the Federation, and then we have the Ibon, they will have to discuss the three. We cannot divide this, and they are experts on this. So that is my note on this, Mr. Chairman. So therefore, I would like to amend, after we approve the clarification, if the Honorable Castro is clarified, I am now going to go to make clarification.
Mr.
Rodriguez, your statements are noted by the chair.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker.
One lang, Representative Castro, before we move on. Yes?
Can I
Manifest? Yes.
But of course, Mr. Speaker, I do respect the position of our colleague, chairman of the Constitutional Amendments. Pero meron pa akong isang questions as regard to the procedural, Mr. Speaker. Pero sinasabi ko po, Mr. Speaker, hindi pa po ako solve doon sa klase ng ano natin na ginagawa natin, if it is Constituent Assembly or just a simple committee meeting.
In which case, Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker,
to get the ball rolling, so to speak, I move that
Yeah,
we
Mr.
take
Speaker,
up,
meron pa akong
consider
isa.
House Bill number 7 and direct the Secretariat to read only the title of the same. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Point of clarification, Mr. Speaker.
Before Representative Castro, is there any objection? Hearing none, the Secretary General is directed to read the title of resolution of both houses number 7.
Resolution of both houses number 7, a resolution of both houses of Congress proposing amendments to certain economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, particularly on Articles 12, 14, and 16.
May I ask for 1 minute suspension?
Hearing is suspended. Floor leader. Okay. Hearing is resumed. Floor
To
leader.
begin the sponsorship of the measure, I move the recognition of the Honorable Senior Deputy Speaker Aurelio Gonzalez.
Senior Deputy Speaker Aurelio Dong Gonzales is recognized to sponsor the measure. Please proceed.
Salamat, Mr. Chairman. Hindi pa ako nag-start mag-sponsorship. Maganda na yung debate natin, Anyway, nabasa na yung resolution both houses number 7, if what is the title. Alam mo, my opening remarks, the greatness is not in where we stand, but in what direction we are moving. We must sail sometimes with the wind and sometimes against it. We must not drift nor lie at anchor. The Honorable Speaker, Speaker Ferdinand Martin Gomez Romualdez, my distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, these are the wise words of Mr. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., one of the most influential American legal minds in history. One of the most influential in history is words wrong through that in order to achieve greatness, we must move and not stop. To soldier on and move towards the direction in which we have set our mind into unflinching despite the challenges and not veering away from the goal we have established. Mr. Chairman, I stand before this honorable chamber which directly represents Filipinos that have empowered to us to serve them, to speak on their behalf, the issues that have profound and effects on their everyday lives. His Excellency President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. remarked that the 1987 Constitution was not written for a globalized world, and that's the way, that is where we are now. We have to adjust so that we can increase the economic activities in the Philippines. We can attract more foreign investors. He further articulated the need to determine all the strategic areas that we cannot allow to be influenced by foreign entity. Be it a corporation or another country, and likewise is not in favor of foreign ownership of lands. The President emphasized that it is more important to get it done without any fuss, and this amendment need to be incorporated into the Constitution to improve the chances of investments and upskilling of our people. Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, in response, said that the President made it clear that these provisions hinder the entry of foreign investments and potential for faster and inclusive economic growth, which in turn could translate into a better life of every Filipino. It has been 37 years since the 1987 Constitution was ratified by our people. 12 Congresses, 7 presidencies, and 12 local government elections came and went, not to mention a few special elections since then. On January 24, 2024, the Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri, together with the Senators Loren Ligarda and Sani Angara, filed Senate Resolution of both Houses number 6, entitled A Resolution of both Houses of Congress proposing amendments to certain economic provision of the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, particularly on Articles 12, 14, and 16. It proposed to amend the economic provisions of the Constitution, particularly number 1, the ownership of public utilities, presently at 60-40% ratio between Filipino and foreign investors. Number 2, the ownership of basic educational institution, presently at 60-40% ratio between Filipino and foreign investors. And number 3, the ownership of advertising industries, presently at 70-30% ratio between Filipino and foreign investors. These representations agrees. Recent data shows that the Philippines ranked 3rd most restrictive out of 84 countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Foreign direct investments, regulatory restrictiveness index. This is because our country has several restricting laws on foreign direct investment which are enshrined directly in the Constitution. Based on Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas report in 2021 FDI inflows total of $10.5 billion US dollars, up to 54% from $6.8 billion in 2020 and surpassing the previous high of $10.3 billion in 2017. But despite growing FDI inflows, the Philippines continues to lag behind its neighbors in Southeast Asia. According to the World Bank, the data shows the country ranked 6 out of 10 ASEAN economies for total of FDI inflows in 2020, and we are the last among the 5 biggest ASEAN economies in cumulative FDI inflows from 2010 to 2020. Mr. Chairman, talaga pong napag-iwanan na tayo, which is why liberalizing foreign ownership restriction will not only lead to more foreign direct investment, but will also enable an environment and fair competition, resulting in a more competitive workforce, which will improve the lives of our fellow Filipinos. Pursuant to Article 17, Article 1, Paragraph 1, which provides any amendment to our revision of this Constitution may be proposed to Congress upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members. And number 2, Rule 21, Sections 143 and 144 of the 19th Congress House Rule, which provide the Congress, upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members, may propose amendments to our revision of the Constitution, and proposals to amend or revise the Constitution shall be made upon resolution which may be filed at any time by any member. The adoption of resolution proposing amendments to our revision of the Constitution shall follow the procedure for the enactment of bills. We filed resolution both houses number 7 before this chamber to propose the aforementioned amendment as contained in Senate Resolution both houses number 6 in toto. Both the House of Representatives and the Senate have commenced proposing economic amendments to the Constitution. Pagkatapos ng ating mabuting pagsusuri at mga panukalang economic reforms, ilagay din natin o incorporate sa teksto ng Constitution ang porsyento ng pag-aari o ownership na sa tingin natin ay nararapat para eksekutory na agad ang mga pagbabago at hindi na maghihintay kung anumang implementong law. Total din naman ay gagawa natin ng batas ito. So, Mr. Chairman, ang akbang na ito, hindi po bago, matagal na po akong sumumporta sa panukalang reforma ng ating Constitution. Mula pa ako nung naging congressman ng 14th Congress at hanggang ngayon, in 17th Congress, 18th Congress, and in 19th Congress, I'm always supporting and filing this RBH number 1, which is political, but that's not be the case. Hindi po political ang pag-uusapan natin dito, kung hindi ang ating economic provision na sinayad ko na 1, 2, and 3. Ayaw po ng ating speaker na i-discuss natin ang political issue dito. Regular na po akong nagpapanukala patungkol dito sa loob ng alos ng aking 15 taon dito sa House of the People. The President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. called for a healthy and a democratic debate or amending a specific economic provision of the Philippine Constitution. Mr. Chairman, my colleague, let us heed the call of President Marcos and let the debates begin. Maraming salamat po.
Mr. Chairman, to deliver his co-sponsorship of the measure, I move for the recognition of the distinguished Deputy Speaker, David Suarez.
Deputy Speaker David J.J. Suarez is recognized to sponsor the measure. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished colleagues, esteemed guests, fellow citizens, I rise today to humbly present and advocate for the passage of a bill proposing crucial amendments to the economic provisions of our Constitution. These proposed amendments represent a significant stride towards fostering a more dynamic, competitive, and inclusive economy for our nation. The proposed amendment seeks to liberalize restrictive economic policies, thereby promoting greater investment, innovation, and job creation. By removing unnecessary constraints on foreign ownership, we can attract much-needed capital inflows and enhance competitiveness on the global stage. Additionally, these amendments will enable us to forge stronger partnerships with international investors, fostering technology transfer, knowledge exchange, and capacity building. Mr. Chairman, I rise today full of joy. Joy that finally we see light at the end of the tunnel. For those who share the same ideal as I do, that in order for us to achieve progress, development, change is required. Change as a nation, change as a people, and change in our institutions, whereby improving our Constitution is necessary. I stand before you with honor. Honor because it is our task and it is our duty as representatives of the 19th Congress to undergo this process, to undergo this journey, to determine, to deliberate, to debate whether or not these amendments are necessary for a better Philippines. And I believe these amendments are necessary for a bagong Pilipinas. But wag po nating kakalimutan na habang nagdedebate po tayo at habang tinatalakay natin ang bawat amendment sa ating saligang batas, let us hold close to our hearts the very dreams and aspirations of the constituents that voted us into office. Nothing but patriotism, nationalism must guide us in deciding what is good for our nation. For today we decide the future of our country. It is in our hands, fellow legislators. And then I would like to thank our resource persons present today, that they will shed light and enlighten us on the amendments that we have proposed on the resolutions of both houses, number 7. I would like to thank my fellow colleagues who served as co-authors for such an important endeavor. Indeed, we are making history. History as our country, as the Senate also undergoes their own deliberations. And I hope, pagkatapos ng maraming pagtatalo, pagkatapos ng maraming pagdedebate, pagkatapos ng maraming pagpapalit ng opinyon, sa dulo, tayo ay magkakasundo. Magkakasundo dahil ang ipinaglalaban po natin ay ang kinabukasan ng ating bansa. In conclusion, I urge my esteemed colleagues to support this resolution, recognizing the transformative impact it will have on our economy and the lives of the people. Let us seize the opportunity to usher in a brighter, more resilient future for our beloved nation. Together, let us embark on this journey towards progress, prosperity, and economic empowerment. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Suarez. Floor Leader. Hearing is suspended. Hindi. Iba na daw. Ano? Floor leader.
Our first resource person, Mr. Speaker, is the Honorable Secretary Arsenio Balisacan of NEDA. He is now present and is now ready to say his position on the matter.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Yes, Representative Lagman.
before we hear the first resource person, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for a clarification, which is in a nature of a prejudicial question. The resolution we are considering is captioned Resolution of both Houses number 7. I would like to underscore both houses. In other words, in the event that we approve this resolution, we are going to pass this on to the Senate for their consideration. And in fact, there is a similar resolution in the Senate. Is that a correct interpretation of what is the import of this resolution of both houses?
Floor leader.
Can I ask for 1 minute suspension?
Hearing is suspended.
Ang ito, resolution of both houses. Once we approve this, we're going to pass it on for their own consideration. Okay, okay. Okay.
Hearing should...
To answer the query of the distinguished gentleman from Albay, the moment we approve our resolution, then we'll send it to the Senate.
And
Yes, Representative Lagman.
in other words, Mr. Speaker, we are not acting alone because this would be the resolution of both houses, the Senate and the House.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker. Although we effectively categorizing it similar to a House concurrent resolution, but not like a concurrent resolution that does not need the concurrence of the Senate. This time around, there must be a concurrence by the Senate. And the concurrence must be by at least 3/4 vote of the Senate, voting separately, because as I've said a while ago, we are treating this in the nature of passing an ordinary resolution or bill.
Consequently,
Representative Lagman.
consequently, Mr. Chairman, once this is passed by the House and concurred by the Senate in the House will meet as a constituent assembly to eventually propose the amendments for ratification or rejection by the people in a proper plebiscite. Is that correct?
That is not exactly the position, Mr. Speaker, because our view is that we are exercising separately the powers granted by the Constitution, which is we vote by at least 3/4 of all the members separately, and then once we have concurred with the same resolution, then it will now be sent to the COMELEC for purposes of executing a plebiscite. And there is no more need to meet as a joint assembly, Mr. Speaker.
Just one last point for the consideration of our members.
Please proceed, Representative Lagman.
Under the Constitution, there are only three modes of amending the Constitution. First, by a Constituent Assembly. Second, by a Constitutional Convention. And third, by People's Initiative. With respect to Constituent Assembly, the representatives and the senators will meet in an assembly because it is a constituent assembly. They cannot be acting separately. And only a constituent assembly of representatives and senators can propose amendments to the Constitution for ratification by the people in a proper plebiscite. I would emphasize on that for the consideration of our members, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, the statements of Representative Lagman is noted by Chair.
Just to state our position, Mr. Speaker, there are two views on the matter. It's not only the view of the distinguished gentleman, which is the sole view. There's another view that we are exercising. Nothing prevents the House from doing it separate from Congress, and that's exactly what we are doing right now. Because under the Constitution, the words jointly assembled is only found in the 1935 Constitution. There is nothing that, there is no mention of the joint assembly in the 1987 Constitution. And that's exactly, kaya nga ho nagkakagulo eh. Palagi may tanong, do we meet jointly or no? Do we vote separately or jointly? Yun ho palagi nagiging issue, kaya nga ho wala mangyari sa pag-amend natin sa Constitution. And this time around, the mere fact that under the Constitution, sinasabi lang naman ho dyan, Congress may, by a vote of 3/4 of all its members, may amend or propose amendment or revision to the Constitution. Hindi naman sinasabi that you have jointly. Although may nagsasabi, kailangan pareho kayong nakaupo sabay-sabay. But that's one view. And meron din naman nagsasabi na hindi naman kailangan, provided that we pass it separately, we vote on it separately, na 3/4 vote, allowed by the Constitution because the Constitution allowed both houses of Congress to create our own rules. And under our rules, we are authorized to propose amendment. So the mere fact that we have already accepted the House resolution filed by our distinguished members and calendar and referred it to the Committee of the Whole, and we're now taking it up. We have already taken that position that we are not sitting as a jointly assembled, but we are taking this in the matter of approving a bill, Mr. Speaker. So I think.
Leader? Yes, Floor Leader. We can now proceed to the
The
invited resource person.
Secretary Abalisacan is now ready with this.
The chair would like to recognize NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. You have the floor.
Honorable Speaker Martin Romualdez, Senior Deputy Speaker Aurelio Gonzalez, Deputy Speaker J.J. Suarez, Majority Leader Manuel Dalipe, distinguished members of the House of Representatives, colleagues in government, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am deeply honored to address the members of the House on this most important or most fundamental matter concerning the life of our nation, the proposed amendment to the 1987 Philippine Constitution. As stated in the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028, the Marcos administration aims to attain and sustain rapid and inclusive economic growth. That is, growth that creates more high-quality and better-paying jobs for our people. But growth is not an end in itself. We are aiming for the ambitious and challenging goal of reducing poverty to a single-digit level by 2028. The National Economic and Development Authority believes that no less than massive amounts of investment in both physical and social infrastructure, as well as human capital, are needed to attain such a feat. Hence, NEDA recognizes the importance of updating the economic provisions in our fundamental law. Over the last few decades, during which we have witnessed our Southeast Asian neighbors overtake us across a wide range of socioeconomic indices, these provisions, in conjunction with other binding constraints to investments, have resulted in lower levels of foreign direct investments or FDI flows to our country. Compared to our dynamic neighbors, historical data show that the Philippines has obtained a smaller share of FDI inflows that could have generated more economic and social opportunities crucial for inclusive growth and development. Globally, evidence shows a significant connection, on average, running from the extent of the country's statutory and equity restrictiveness to the country's realized FDI flows. As a member of the academic community and a student of Philippine economic development, we have studied and witnessed how our nation has missed several chances to attract FDI, technological know-how, and managerial talent that our economy needs to raise its productivity and competitiveness in the global arena. Though we have made significant progress, our neighbors have proceeded at a far more desirable pace. We must catch up, not be held back by uncompetitive markets dominated by a few players, expensive inputs that result in higher prices for end consumers, and incomplete value chains that prevent us from producing more technologically complex goods and services. President Marcos has given his directive. The Constitution must be updated to meet the daunting challenges of the present and prepare us for the uncertainties and complexities of the future. We must lift restrictions on critical sectors such as public utilities, education, mass media, and advertising, so that we can realize their untapped potential and enable them to contribute to the country's economic progress. Opening up public utilities to foreign investment will improve the quality and affordability of services such as energy and water distribution, and offer viable options to address the financing gaps in the infrastructure sector. In the education sector, this initiative will ensure that Filipinos can access global knowledge, skills, and technology that can nurture a culture of innovation, positioning the Philippines as a competitive hub for knowledge exchange in the region. In this era of globalization, allowing foreign investment in mass media will also enable local media professionals to increase their global presence. More importantly, this will allow the industry to modernize, expand markets, and keep pace with international trends. Additionally, allowing foreign investment in advertising will introduce new ideas, technologies, and best practices that can enhance the effectiveness and reinvigorate the creative excellence of our local advertising industry. NEDA has been asked if the amendments of the Constitution are included among the priorities contained in the PDP 2023 to 2028. While the plan outlines that strategies that we need to carry out to attain our medium-term targets, the reform agenda included modifications to executive issuances and specific pieces of legislation, given our current legal and regulatory framework. To be sure, this initiative will not solve all our economic ills. Amending these economic provisions is one complementary strategy to unlock the country's economic potential. Let me emphasize that we only reap the benefits I mentioned if we also address the other problems involving high energy costs, inadequate connectivity infrastructure, slow bureaucratic processes, inconsistent local and national regulations, and highly concerning learning poverty and malnutrition. Conversely, a policy environment promoting openness to foreign investment can exert more significant pressure on the government to urgently address the complex challenges I have mentioned. In conclusion, I urge our legislators to proceed with deliberation and prudence in considering these amendments. Let us work together to ensure that any of the changes we make are not only responsive to the needs of our time, but also serve as the foundation for a more prosperous, resilient, and inclusive future for all Filipinos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Balisacan. Floor Leader.
Next resource person to be recognized, Speaker, is Yusek Seno Ronald Abencio, Chief Economist from the Department of Finance.
The Chair would like to recognize Yusek Seno Ronald Abenoa, Chief Economist, Department of Finance. You have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon to the Honorable Speaker and our honorable representatives, as well as our colleagues in government and our stakeholders in the private sector. The current review and proposed amendments in the 1987 Constitution is an opportunity to liberalize certain sectors which could attract more foreign direct investments. In general, looking at the experience of countries over the years, countries with liberalized and investor-friendly policies have experienced substantial gains in foreign direct investments. And in looking at those experiences, we can see that the acceleration in the inflow of FDIs have resulted in multidimensional benefits, including faster economic growth, possible technology transfers, improvements in human capital development, and even increase in tax revenues for the host country. The DOF acknowledges the importance of assessing the proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution to support the opening up of specific sectors and contribute to the country's medium to long-term economic growth and development. We would like to emphasize that the review could concentrate on certain economic aspects, including in the areas of public utilities, mass media, advertising, education, and mining, but could exclude land ownership liberalization. In line with this, the DOF proposes the outright deletion of foreign restrictions in the areas of educational institutions, mass media, and advertising. This effort to fully liberalize and lift such restrictions contribute to a policy environment that will make the economic regime more adaptable and responsive to current social and economic realities. It will also send a clear signal to the international community that the Philippines is open for business, making way for foreign investments. It is hoped that the inflow, the liberal foreign ownership rules, would stimulate economic productivity, growth, employment generation, and promote healthy competition. Second, the DOF is also proposing the insertion of the phrase, unless otherwise provided by law, to the provision on the public utilities, as well as the nationality requirement for co-production, joint venture, or production sharing for the exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources, as in the case of mineral resources. This will give Congress the flexibility to enact laws that would free up the economy to foreign investors. This is a subtle approach and could provide more discussions on the direction of the liberalization. Lastly, we would like to highlight that the challenges being encountered by our country in attracting FDIs does not solely be attributed to the existing restrictive economic provisions. This is in recognition that there are other factors that are also important in attracting foreign investments, including, for example, improving the ease of doing business, as well as the governance environment in the country. Macroeconomic stability, as well as sustained investments, both on physical infrastructure and on human capital, is also important, as emphasized by our NEDA Secretary. In view thereof, the DOF would like to emphasize that these discussions on the amendments to the 1987 Constitution will form a part, or should form a part, of a broader package of measures aimed at enhancing and drawing more investments in the country. It is hoped that we can get more private sector support in getting the transformation of the economy to become more sustainable, inclusive, and more beneficial to our countrymen. We end our statement here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yusek Seno Ronald Abenoja, Chief Economist of the Department of Finance. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize the Honorable Attorney Agaton Teodoro Overo, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry.
The Chair would like to recognize Assistant Secretary Agaton Teodoro Overo, Assistant Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, honorable members of this Congress, fellow public servants, colleagues from the private sector, good afternoon. In the words of Secretary Fred Pascual, DTI stands with a call to amend the economic provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. This is not a call for relinquishing our national interest, but rather a strategy to align with the inevitable global economic currents. It is a call for practicality, openness, and strategic action to empower the Philippine economy to reach its full potential. The proposed amendments to the 1987 Constitution are expected to result in more foreign direct investment, international education, globally competitive mass media, international advertising, and modern utilities. Increased investments expand the economy and create jobs. Access to world-class education and research facilities nurtures a culture of innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity among Filipino students, teachers, and researchers. Allowing for foreign participation in mass media allows more convergence of media, information technology, and telecommunications industries. Collaboration with global counterparts enriches local expertise, refines skills, and positions the Philippines as a hub for creative excellence in advertising. The amendments to the Public Services Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and Foreign Investments Act are considered game changers. However, FDI restrictions are enshrined directly in the Constitution rather than in an investment law or sectoral legislation. DTI supports the amendment of the economic provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution to enable the country to adapt and respond to current and future socio-economic conditions. This support is driven by a collective desire for economic and social transformation that will accelerate the uplifting of the lives of all Filipinos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ASEC Ubero. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize the Honorable Romeo Bernardo, Monetary Board Member of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas.
The Chair would like to recognize Mr. Romeo Bernardo, Monetary Board Member, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Deputy Speakers, Honorable Members of the House of Representatives. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas maintains its view on the proposed economic amendments to the 1987 Philippine Constitution as stated in its position papers dated 12 September 2014, 6 December 2016, and 29 November 2019, submitted to the House of Representatives during the 16th, 17th, and 18th Congress, respectively. In particular, from an economic perspective, we continue to support the easing of equity restrictions on foreign participation in the economy. The BSP has supported the government's pursuit of structural reforms over the past decades, particularly those aimed at strengthening the country's growth prospects. These reforms help stimulate the economy, generate more jobs, facilitate the efficiency of public services, and improve competition via fostering a level playing field for investors. We will continue to support such measures. Based on BSP's responsibility and objectives, BSP supports efforts that will promote inclusive economic growth of the country, including, among others, easing restrictive economic provisions in the 1987 Constitution. BSP believes that reducing, if not removing, restrictive provisions will facilitate increase in foreign capital investment and hasten the growth of the economy, which in turn can expedite the ability of the nation to realize inclusive economic growth. The frequently perceived wisdom underlying the proposed to amend or revise the Constitution is that it gives the nation the opportunity to be responsive to the changing times, enables it to steer towards the direction it envisions. Excuse me. The scope and extent of international trade and commerce have dramatically increased over the last 4 decades, and so have the scale and sophistication of the global and domestic economy and financial system. In this regard, we believe that there may be room to consider the amendments to the economic provisions of the Constitution in order to make the Philippines more competitive and allow our laws to keep pace with recent and future developments. These proposed amendments to the economic provisions of the Philippine Constitution are in line with the government's efforts and measures to address major challenges in attracting foreign investment that in turn help achieve growth and financial resilience. To fully realize the economic benefits of such amendments, it would be instructive to advance policies that would enable domestic industries to develop and enhance their productivity. In closing, we reiterate that the BSP remains ready to work with Congress in pushing key reforms to facilitate an enabling investment environment towards furthering the country's economic growth and development. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernardo. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that you recognize Mr. Calixto Toti Chichamco, President of the Foundation for Economic Freedom.
The Chair would like to recognize Mr. Calixto Toti Chichamco, President, Foundation for Economic Freedom. You have the floor.
Honorable Speakers and Deputy Speakers, Honorable Congressmen, we, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, have been continuously advocating for the removal of the restrictive economic provisions, particularly the foreign equity caps and the Filipino First provisions, enshrined in the 1987 Constitution that have hampered the economic growth and development of the country. We believe that lifting these restrictive provisions, while not a magic pill to solve our economic challenges, can nevertheless generate net benefits for the economy for the following reasons. First, removing the restrictive economic provisions in our Constitution is necessary to address the uncertainty and unpredictability of our laws. While there is foreign capital coming into the country, especially because of liberalization reforms like the amendments to the Public Service Act, the Trade Liberalization Act, and the amendments to the implementing rules and regulations of the Renewable Energy Act, these legislative changes are still subject to challenges that may render them ineffective. For example, there are currently 2 Supreme Court challenges to the amendments to the Public Service Act to date. Pending the resolution of these challenges, the legal framework on investments in this sector remains unpredictable. Second, eliminating the restrictive economic provisions in the Constitution is also necessary to allow for greater flexibility and agility in policymaking so we can adapt to evolving economic needs and realities in both domestic and global settings. It must be noted that the Philippines is alone in having economic restrictions in its constitution. Other countries have their restrictions through policy and legislation, providing them the flexibility to adapt quickly to maximize opportunities. To be able to compete, we must be flexible enough to quickly adjust to relevant economic conditions through policy and legislation as the need arises, not through the difficult-to-change restrictions provided in the Constitution. Third, we must clearly signal to foreign investors that we're open to investments to attract more quality foreign investments. Removing the economic restrictions from our Constitution will send this signal loud and clear. Fourthly, the removal of the restrictive economic provisions will facilitate real competition to the entry of more players. In fact, even just the threat of competition will force existing players to behave and to compete knowing that there is a possibility of new market players entering the country. It should be noted that Philippine markets remain the most concentrated among its neighbors. Such a high market concentration shows that the restrictions have only benefited the oligarchy. For example, the entry of Starlink and other players motivated local telco companies to improve their infrastructure and services offered to consumers. Local telco companies increased their capital spending and offered satellite-based services essential to those in remote areas. By lifting these restrictions, competition will be fostered, leading to better opportunities and services for all Filipinos. Finally, I would like to advance a political argument. This is my personal opinion, not as president of the Foundation for Economic Freedom. When President Bongbong Marcos was elected with the largest ever mandate in 2022, it indicated that the people wanted systemic change and that the 1987 Constitution had failed to live up to the expectations of the people. And Marcos back to power is the very antithesis of the people power revolution. The people were sending a message. Don't get me wrong. The 1987 Constitution restored democracy, and we should be grateful for that. However, its Filipino first and Filipino only ideology has failed as an economic model and has failed to uplift the lives of the people. Just as the election of Milei in Argentina showed that the Argentinian people wanted a dramatically different direction from Peronismo, the election of President Bongbong Marcos shows that the people want a different direction from the Filipino first and Filipino only ideology in the 1987 Constitution. You, as politicians, must listen to the political message that the people are giving. The people want to move in a dramatically different direction. In conclusion, we emphasize that amending the restrictions in the 1987 Constitution is not an end-all and be-all solution. Factors such as lack of infrastructure, expensive power rates, high logistics costs, and red tape continue to deter FDIs. Nonetheless, amending the restrictive provisions is a necessary first step to create a more conducive investment environment. Amending the Constitution to show the Philippines' commitment to investments need not be mutually exclusive with enacting policies and reforms that aim to improve the rule of law, address corruption, enhance the ease of doing business. The two can be addressed at the same time to attract much-needed investments, to generate the capital to build infrastructure, and to acquire the necessary technology to ensure that Filipinos get improved basic services. Removing the restrictions in the Constitution is the first among many necessary steps to place the Philippines at par with the legal framework of our more competitive ASEAN neighbors. For these reasons, we strongly advocate for amending the restrictive economic provisions in our Constitution. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toti Chikiamko. Floor leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize Mr. Sunny Africa, the Executive Director of Ibon Foundation.
The chair would like to recognize Mr. Sunny Africa, Executive Director of Ibon Foundation. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I beg the chair's indulgence. We are a bit on the defensive, so we do want to be given that whole 10 minutes to state our case, please. We also shared a PowerPoint presentation, but there we go.
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. We do feel the need for change right now, that is a very real demand by many Filipinos. But we want to say that although IBON can only speak for itself formally right now, we are in touch with the biggest networks of basic sectors organizations in the country, and they do share our position. IBON Foundation's position is to oppose the proposed amendments to the economic provisions. The economic provisions of 87 Constitution are best retained and not subjected to any revisions or amendments. Economic cha-cha, we believe, is unnecessary, it distracts from real development, and is counterproductive. We think it is unnecessary because so many things can be done right now to uplift the conditions for Filipino people and to help the economy. The economic cha-cha and opening up is unnecessary. We think it is distracting because the fixation on foreign investment distracts from the more basic changes in strategy. As I was telling my seatmate earlier, we do need a national industrialization policy which can be done better under the current Constitution. And it is counterproductive because if we change the Constitution, we will be losing legal leverage precisely for the same kind of protective industrial policies that other countries are doing today, including advanced countries like the US, EU, Japan, China, and many other countries na nakatingala tayo. We strongly disagree that foreign investment is a magic bullet for development, and we do sometimes think that sometimes things seem like common sense after being said for so long. But like when the world was shown to be round instead of flat, when confronted with facts, we do want to think that we can reconsider what we think is common sense. Could you please go back, please? We basically have three major points to help the Congress revisit the supposed common sense about the benefits of foreign investment. We will be presenting facts, one, on the supposed restrictiveness of the Philippines, secondly, on the supposed contribution to development of foreign investment, and third, on the supposed connection between restrictiveness and foreign investment. This first slide, I think, is quite important. It is wrong to look at just constitutions as the sign of restrictiveness because in every country in the world, the foreign investment regime is a combination of the law of the land, the constitution, but also prevailing laws. If you look at the totality of constitutions and prevailing laws, the Philippines is actually now among the least restrictive economies of foreign investment in the region. This started with so many laws, starting with the Mining Act of 1995, which allowed 100% foreign ownership under an FTAA, all the way up to the recent laws of the opening public services. We strongly disagree with the notion that inflexibility is a problem. We think that is a wrong analogy. Hindi naman yoga yung economic policy making. If we need the country to regulate foreign investment, whether it's in ordinary law or the law of the land, the point is it needed or not? Flexibility is not something that will benefit economic policy making. And we do argue foreign investment restrictions are necessary. This chart shows foreign investment restrictions, not just in the Philippines, but in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia. Also for fun, we put in China. I think very clearly, green shows sectors that are 100% open, that goes all the way from utilities to power to transport, retail, banking, finance, all the way to the end of mass media. You will notice that the Philippines has the most green boxes, meaning the Philippines now has the most open sectors to foreign investment. Our basic data sources for this are the World Bank, ease of investing across borders, the OECD Foreign Restrictiveness Index, the State Department investment climate statements, and actually we looked at the individual policy regimes of various countries. So categorically, it is untrue that the Philippines is restrictive. The Constitution is restrictive, but if you look at the totality of laws, the Philippines is among the least restrictive economies of foreign investment in the region. Next slide. Despite all the claims about foreign investment being small in the Philippines, it is true. The Philippines has less foreign investment than Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, or Vietnam, but we have more foreign investment than Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos combined. And again, in the same way we disagree that flexibility is a virtue in itself, having more or less investment than others is not a measure of development. The real measure of development is if the foreign investment that comes in, has it helped the Philippines or not? In the case of the Philippines, foreign direct investment stock has grown 40 times since 1987 to $113 billion today. Measured as a share of GDP, it grew from 7.4% in 1987 to almost 30%, 28% in 2022. The question is, after so much foreign investment in the country, have we developed? Next slide, please. The next slide shows categorically, after decades of foreign direct investment, our fundamentals are unsound, our fundamentals have gotten worse. Manufacturing has fallen to its smallest share of the economy in 75 years, since 1949. Agricultural has fallen to its smallest share of the economy in its entire history. So categorically, we disagree that foreign investment that has come in has helped the Philippine economy. The next slide clearly shows foreign investment is 100% allowed in Filipino manufacturing. I think it should be a point of reflection, despite manufacturing being 100% open to foreign investment, why has Filipino manufacturing fallen to its smallest share of GDP in 75 years, 17.9% last year? Right now, the Philippines has the second smallest manufacturing sector among our ASEAN neighbors. This is despite about $17 billion in identifiable foreign investment being in manufacturing. Next slide, a bit of insight into the exact problem for that. There's a lot of hype about foreign investment coming in, but we take three examples of Intel, Hanjin, and Malampaya. These are three corporations that have cumulatively invested about $7 to $8 billion in the whole time they were here. But I think it should be very surprising or a point of interest that Intel, despite being in the country for 35 years, despite $1.5 billion in foreign investment, despite at some point giving over $5 billion in exports, and supposedly creating nearly 2,000 jobs, when they left the Philippines in 2009, there was no Philippine domestic electronics industry. Same goes for Hanjin, same goes for Malampaya. Foreign investment comes in, it makes its profits. That is what foreign investment does. It's not good or bad, it's not evil or an angel or a demon, but foreign investment is here to profit from the Philippines, not to develop the country. Without a proper foreign investment framework, such as by a national industrialization policy, foreign investment will come in without developing the Philippine economy. Next slide, also I think very alarming. In the Philippines, by various measures, the majority of manufacturing reported as manufacturing in the Philippines is not even Filipino. We look at various measures by the PSA, by the World Bank, even by the Business World Top 1,000 corporations. Foreign manufacturers take anywhere from 52 to about 71% of reported manufacturing in the Philippines. So most Filipino manufacturing isn't even Filipino. The next slide, there's always a claim that foreign investment creates job creation. Well, we argue that the statistics don't show that. Even if annual foreign investment inflows have been greatly increasing from about $1.5 to $2.5 billion annually in the mid-2000s to about $8 to $12 billion annually in the last 5 years, it is very noticeable that job creation in private establishments has actually fallen from an annual average of 520,000 in the mid-2000s to just about 400,000 today. This is also including, of course, the period of COVID, but the period of the COVID pandemic also saw record foreign investment in the country. Next slide. I will do this in the next 1 minute. I think this is an important point because if you look at the amount of foreign investment in the Philippines right now, the Philippine foreign investment stock is 28% of GDP. This is more foreign investment than South Korea, Taiwan, and China had in the 1970s and 80s during their period of economic takeoff. And actually, it is more foreign investment than in South Korea, Taiwan, and China today. So that argument that foreign investment is critical for development, that has not been the case in the Philippines. South Korea, Taiwan, and China did not primarily rely on foreign investment for their economic takeoff. They're not relying on it now. On the other hand, the Philippines has relatively more foreign investment, but it's clearly much more backward. If you can jump to the next 2 slides. One more slide. Just one more, please. Sorry, next again. Okay. This may not be very clear, but The OECD Restrictiveness Index is always used as an example of how restricted the Philippines is. What Ibon did was we looked at UNCTAD data for annual foreign direct investment inflows and for total foreign direct investment stock. If it was true that taking away restrictiveness increases foreign investment, then presumably we would have seen a downward sloping line in terms of the more open, the more foreign investment. But in the biggest database we've seen of 81 countries by the OECD, it turns out that regardless of the level of foreign direct investment restrictions, foreign direct investment inflows on an annual basis in over 60 countries are in the 1 to 4% of GDP range. The point being, it wasn't actually the restrictiveness that affected the amount of foreign investment coming in. The next slide shows the same point, not just in terms of flows for 2019, the last pre-COVID result, but for total foreign investment stock, the exact same result. I think it should be very striking that an open country like Slovenia has less foreign investment than very close Libya. Germany actually has less foreign investment as a share of GDP than the Philippines, which is supposedly close. Last point, we looked at the foreign direct investment restrictiveness index in major ASEAN countries, including the Philippines, in the next slide. And again, there is no clear universal correlation. In ASEAN, among our neighbors, there's no result that you reduce the restrictiveness, you increase foreign direct investment. Clearly, in the case of the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand, in 2 countries, as restrictions were reduced, there was a small increase in foreign direct investment as share of GDP. But on the contrary, in 3 countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand, as restrictions were reduced, foreign direct investment as a share of GDP actually fell. So we want to conclude with that point. There is no reason to change the constitution. If you want to develop the country, so much more can be done with the current constitution. If we think that foreign direct investment will automatically help the Philippines, that is not the case in our country or in many other countries. Last point, even changing the restrictiveness will not actually necessarily even increase foreign investment. So we're categorically opposed to the changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sunny Africa, Executive Director of Ibon Foundation. Floor leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize Professor Raul Fabella, Professor Emeritus of the UP School of Economics.
The chair would like to recognize Professor Raul Fabella, Professor Emeritus UP School of Economics via Zoom. Professor Fabella, please proceed. Yes, Professor, please proceed. We can hear you.
I would like to thank the leadership of the lower house and the committee of the whole house for the invitation to share our humble illuminations in the matter. I support the lifting of Section 11 Article 12 and of the RBH7. I think on the development experience of nations is that the development experience is that all progress eventually boils down to investment, just as Secretary Balsahan alluded to, specifically to the share of national income that the nation sets aside for investment. Let's call the investment rate. Share of investment spending in GDP. Countries that invest less will, over time, adjust to countries that invest more. That is the sad story of the Philippines. Countries' investment has to be financed. The first source of investment is, of course, national savings. Percent of GDP is set aside. Countries that save more have greater leeway for financing investment needs. Countries that save less need more outside savings for an investment environment just to keep up. ASEAN, as the Philippines lowers investment as percentage of GDP and as well as savings, 22%. It also has the lowers the foreign investment. Vietnam is higher by about 10% in both counts than the Philippines. And it has, of course, about double the direct foreign investment. Note that in 2022 year that is mannered in the table that I have in my PowerPoint, is itself typical of the Philippine experience in the last 5 years. The standard investment rate in the ASEAN is 25 to 35% in either account. We have privileged consumption of savings, saving and investment as a nation. The government has been cheerleading the national consumption binge. Our government capital outlay is less than 5% of GDP for those 4 decades. It was between 6 to 10% of GDP among the ASEAN. We still have to reach the ASEAN standard. We are literally bottom feeders in the investment. I have a slide which shows that we have literally been bottom feeders in the investment space. I'm just going to go forward. Senator Grace Poe, an erstwhile Supreme Court Justice from the party, correctly pointed out one hearing that regularly examined constitutional errors through laws and amendments thereof, such as the PSA. They are right. RBH7. Investors, of course, prefer stronger federal commitment from perceived governance countries. And of course, we are perceived as a weak governance country in the global ratings. Laws are easier to reverse than constitutions. The latter is therefore more valid than laws as credible commitment device. The stronger the commitment device, the better investors feel about being in one account. As was already mentioned, the Supreme Court is currently deliberating whether the PSA law and the lifting of the 64 improve the prospect of more investments in there. Those government not just education and telecommunications. In 2016, the Philippine Supreme Court, confirming an arbitrary ruling, ordered the Philippine government to indemnify the law 25 billion pesos. Had the ownership restriction not been there, Terminal 3 would have been run and earning since 2000. The 25 billion indemnity would have been 5 billion pesos was then the cost of foreign ownership. Just one case. Now you can say that ownership of airports is now liberalized. But as I've already mentioned, the credibility of laws is lower than the credibility of constitution, the protection of property and contract. And in the next decade, we have to activate the red flag that's popped out in every state Twitters. And what you can say is that beware Italian come in and give it to him who has 10 pounds and cash the worthless servant into the outer town. Matthew 25. Final word, I support the proposal to but 12, and indeed, all other parties' instruments masquerading as basic values in 1987. Framers of 87 Constitution simply think that future lawmakers, present company included, won't have enough wisdom to weigh in on these. I'm going to be guided by St. Augustine, who before conversion prayed thus, Lord, make me change. Unquote. Instead, I take comfort from your head. Said, the perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Raul Favela, Professor Emeritus, UP School of Economics. Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize Ms. Hazel Parcon Santos, PhD, a researcher and an economist.
The Chair would like to recognize Ms. Hazel Parcon Santos. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the Congress. Before I proceed, I would like to state that the views I will express this afternoon are based on the empirical study that I co-wrote with my colleagues at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, but do not represent the official position of the BSP. The title of our research is ASEAN 5 Countries in Competition for FDI. So this study was released to the public last December 2021 as a BSP discussion paper. In this study, we evaluated the possible factors that may help account for the disparities in foreign direct investments received by 5 countries that are members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, from 15 source countries for the period 2009 to 2019. In our study, we explain that foreign investors look at a wide range of factors in potential host countries, including but not limited to market size, business costs, human capital, macroeconomic stability, economic openness, governance, business regulations, and infrastructure. Given the main interests of the Congress this afternoon, I will briefly discuss the results of our empirical findings on the possible impact of FDI regulatory restrictiveness on a country's FDI position. In our study, we used the FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index as a measure of a country's economic openness. We obtained this index from the database of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. To briefly explain, this index is a composite measure of 4 items. First is foreign equity restrictions. Second is discriminatory screening or approval mechanisms. Third is restrictions on employment of foreigners as key personnel. And fourth, other operational restrictions pertaining to FDI. Our empirical estimations show that the OECD sub-index on FDI equity restrictions is negative and statistically significant in 6 out of our 10 specifications. Since a higher index value indicates more restrictive regulations, this implies that reducing restrictions on foreign equity has the potential to increase foreign direct investments. However, in some specifications, when we considered factors such as a country's rule of law, infrastructure, and ease of doing business, specifically in trading across borders, the sub-index on FDI equity restrictions becomes statistically insignificant. This implies that these other factors could be more important in attracting more foreign direct investments. we conducted additional estimations using the overall FDI restrictiveness index and its other components, namely the sub-indices and restrictions on the employment of foreigners as key personnel and discriminatory screening or approval mechanisms. Results show that the overall FDI restrictiveness index is statistically insignificant for all investors when macroeconomic stability, governance, ease of doing business, and quality of infrastructure are accounted for. As an additional information, among the factors we examined and based on their respective coefficient estimates, the ease of doing business associated with trading across borders appears to be the most important determinant of FDI, at least for the group of source and host countries included in our study. We likewise find that foreign investors look at the country's quality of human capital, corporate taxes, infrastructure, governance, competitive industrial performance, and technological innovation. Our study is limited by the fact that aggregated FDI is used in these estimations. Thus, our estimates only reflect average effects. Different investors with varied investment motivations and with specific target sectors may have different sensitivities on the factors we considered. Our study suggests that there is no factor that can single-handedly attract foreign direct investments. A country can open its economy to foreign investors, but it must be accompanied by efficient business regulations, good governance, and improvements in infrastructure, among others. Potential host countries need to compete in different dimensions, and a combination of the different factors is required. For policy, this suggests that a holistic approach is needed to successfully attract and retain FDI. Let me end here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hazel Parcon Santos. Floor leader.
Mr. Chair, I move that we recognize Mr. Rucher Lacaza, Supervising Legislative Staff Officer 3 of the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department, House of Representatives.
Mr. Rucher Lacaza, Supervising Legislative Staff Officer 3 of CPRB. You recognize, you have the floor.
Hello. A pleasant afternoon, the House Speaker, to the Deputy Speakers, and to the House members. Today I will be presenting a CPBRD study titled Impact of Regulatory Barriers on Inward FDI in the ASEAN 5. So basically, this study was inspired by a BSP paper presented earlier by Ms. Parcon Santos. The analysis here is undertaken by adopting her approach with a few adjustments, specifically an expanded set of FDI source countries, a different treatment of negative FDI inflows, and a period that extends 2020. So this study also examined a subset of the variables used by Parcon Santos. But basically, the main contribution of this paper is to provide empirical evidence on the impact of foreign equity restrictions on FDI inflows, and at the same time to provide a more detailed discussion on FDI restrictions across ASEAN, especially in the Philippines. All right, next slide, please. So from a highly restrictive and complicated investment regime, Philippines adopted a more open FDI strategy. So in 1991, the Philippines introduced the Foreign Service Act, signaling a shift towards a more open economy. In 1994, Philippines embarked on foreign bank liberalization. Fast forward to 2000, the Philippines implemented the retail trade liberalization. More recently, the Philippines introduced the CREATE Act, including the passage of the more important investment reform bills, such as amendments of the Philippine Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and Foreign Investment Act. So these reforms have not only attracted FDI, but also stimulated economic growth and development. Next slide, please. Indeed, reforms, can you go back to the previous, please? All right. So indeed, the these reforms that liberalize FDI has improved FDI inflows. If you can see in the chart, cumulative FDI inflows grew from 12 billion US dollars in 1990 to 1999 to 16.3 billion in 2000 to 2009, then surged 58.6 billion in USD in 2029. And in just 3 years, it reached 28 billion USD from 2020 to 2022. So basically, FDI inflows in the Philippines have significantly improved over the past year, despite restrictiveness. However, despite growing FDI inflows, the Philippines continues to lag behind its neighbors in the region. So the Philippines ranked 6 out of 10 ASEAN countries in 2020. So despite being in the same region and sharing similar economic opportunities, the Philippine FDI net inflows have not seen the same level of FDI as countries like Indonesia and Vietnam. So in this study, we hypothesize that while we continue to invest in human capital, improve governance, and other important factors that attract FDI, we believe that there is a need to ease restrictions, regulatory restrictions on FDI to attract more foreign investment. Now, all right. So next slide, please. So to introduce you our variable of interest, we use the OECD FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index. So basically, it measures the level of restrictiveness of policies implemented in 85 countries. So restrictions are evaluated from 0, on a scale of 0 means open and 1 means closed. Now, it is important to note that the index assesses the restrictiveness of FDI policies in economy, not the overall attractiveness of a country as an FDI destination. All right, so what are the specific categories of regulatory restrictive? So we have the foreign equity limitations, screening and approval, key foreign personnel, and other restriction types. And as you notice, the majority of these restrictions stem from foreign equity, so the blue bar. Next slide, please. So, all right, so comparing ASEAN with the Philippines, over the years, Philippines has consistently ranked poorly relative to its peers on the FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index. So the most recent data for 2020 shows that the Philippine index is almost 3 times higher than the score of Vietnam, or almost 2 times higher than the average score of the ASEAN 5, excluding the Philippines. Next slide, please. So as you notice, majority of the restrictions are in the form of equity restrictions, and Philippines being the most restrictive. As you notice, in 2020, foreign equity restriction sub-index stood at 0.30, representing 80% of the Philippines' overall score. So this is 2 times higher than its peers' scores on this single measure. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. All right, so here we look into the FDI restrictions in the Philippines. And as you see, most of the sectors in 2020 are still high in terms of restriction, and it is mainly due to high equity restrictions. So here, media stands out as the most heavily restricted, followed by business services, transport, telecommunications, and the primary sectors, while manufacturing, financial services, and distribution experience the least restriction. Now, it is important to note that the data, the chart, only captures 2020. So legislative changes that happened beyond that are not captured, captured by the data. All right. Okay, so before we delve into the analysis, so next slide, please. We had a correlation between FDI as a percentage of GDP and the index. And it seems that they are negatively correlated. Of course, visual inspection of correlation alone is not sufficient to determine the real impact of foreign investment restrictions on investment flows. But again, it's a good starting point of analysis. So to accurately assess the impact of foreign equity restrictions on FDI inflows, so just like Parcon Santos, it should be followed by a more rigorous modeling techniques. So next slide, please. All right, so here we adopted a gravity model approach, and here are the results. So In the standard gravity model, so GDP of the host country is actually positive and distance is negative, implying that larger market size of the host economy increases FDI, while greater geographical distance decreases FDI. Now, let's turn our attention to our variable of interest, which is the equity restriction. As you can see, the result is negative and statistically significant when considering market size, distance, macroeconomic stability, corporate tax rates, quality of human capital, and governance. So it is estimated that the introduction of reforms leading to a 10% reduction in level of foreign equity restrictions as measured by the index could potentially increase FDI by around 7.7% on average. So this is consistent with the earlier results that reducing FDI restrictions, especially in the restrictions on foreign entry, can potentially increase foreign investment. All right. Okay, in conclusion, easing regulatory barriers, specifically foreign equity restrictions, has the potential to attract FDI inflows and achieve economic growth. So this finding suggests that the policy makers may consider reviewing and revising foreign equity restrictions to foster a more welcoming and favorable investment climate for investors. Again, while easing restrictions on foreign ownership can attract FDI, it is important to recognize that it is not a standalone solution. It should be seen as just one component of a comprehensive set of reforms aimed at enhancing the country's attractiveness to foreign investors. Policymakers and investors should consider a range of other factors that can either attract or deter foreign investment, just like improvement in human capital, infrastructure, improvement in governance, and so on. So these factors should work hand in hand to maximize the potential for FDI inflows in the regions, especially in the Philippines. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Floor leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we suspend consideration of the resolution of both houses number 7.
Is there any objection? There is none. Motion is approved. Floor leader, we will just suspend
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Mr.
the
Chairman.
hearing of the committee of the whole House, and we will have our plenary session. We'll just take up one very important matter. Then when we will adjourn the plenary session and we'll resume back again to our committee of the whole.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in line with that, I move that we suspend the committee hearing of the committee as a whole.
There's a motion to suspend the hearing of the committee of the whole. Any objection? This hearing is suspended. We'd like to remind our resource persons to stay put. We will just have our regular session and take up very important matters, and after which, when we adjourn right away, after taking the very important matters, we will resume the committee of the whole House. The meeting of the committee of the whole House is now suspended.